when we've done these forums. We're trying to do them sort of 3 times a year, maybe. This is actually the first time we've done the allotment forum this year, so I am a little bit late on the organisation of it. So usually in the past we've done it very informally, where it's just been very much a conversation. But actually today, myself and my colleague Paul have actually shared a little bit of a presentation, because there's so much to share in terms of imagery, and we felt that that would be a better way to like demonstrate and talk as be a stimulus for conversation. So without further ado, I am actually going to attempt to share my screen. Yeah, just to say that there is some text which is mainly as a prompt notes for myself and Paul, yeah, just bear with us on that, some of the text. So here we go. Let's try and open this up. Share. Okay, I'm hoping that you can all see my screen. Can someone give me a thumbs up? Can you see that? Great. Okay, brilliant. Fabulous. So just to say, so we're, as I say, we're a UK-wide charity, and we support communities to garden, farm and grow together. And today I'm hoping that you are in this space because you want to learn about yes, allotments and water. We're going to just talk about four broad themes. Hopefully that'll be about 20 minutes, and then we'll have conversation for questions. At any point, if you wish to type anything in the chat, please do, and we will try and respond as we go along. Failing that, we will come back to your questions afterwards. We'll sort of play it by ear a bit, if that's okay. So today it's about just setting the framework for about kind of water resource considerations, your microclimate source structure. Then we'll kind of just share some ideas about collecting water on allotment, and also some different ways to water allotment, and the frequent question about how often should I water on my allotment in hot weather. I did have some very simple poll actually, which I'm just wondering if I don't think I can do it at the same time as doing my screen. Yes, I'm just going to carry on. I think I might leave the poll. Yes, I'm going to do that. Leave that. So Paul, would you like to just talk about the microclimate?
Didn't know I was being thrown in at the deep end. Was this the first slide on the presentation? Okay, fair enough. Okay.
It is now.
So it is now. It's like going to play cricket and finding out that you're the opening batsman. Okay, yeah, microclimate. So, crucial thing for me with watering gardens, and we're thinking about water resources, is not starting at the end of needing kit, but it's starting with looking at the site. And maybe the first place to start is microclimate. If we pay attention to the microclimate of our gardens, as I've said here on the notes, it can change a site's water needs. So it's not for nothing that um, a lot of good gardeners and garden designers and farmers say that the first thing you should have in any horticulture system is your windbreaks sorted out, for example. So exposure to drying winds increases watering requirements. So the use of windbreaks is a really effective way of conserving water. I know this can be difficult on allotments, but actually even those low temporary windbreaks can save you watering, let alone planting permanent windbreaks, which might not be possible where you are, or even clever use of your shed as a way of sheltering your crops. So yeah, we can use shade to reduce the need for watering as well as creating windbreaks. We can think about where sun and shade falls, and even floating crop covers like fleeces can help with this in the heat of the summer. Um, yeah, and cover crops. So no bare soil is a great way of saving water through microclimate adjustment. You'll notice that underneath living plants, the soil remains damp, even when bare soil is bone dry, a couple of centimeters deep. Please share where you are in the chat. Oh, well, I'm in a part of the world where like Gary was saying a few minutes ago to the rest of us. Don't need to worry about water today. Yeah, so cover crops and avoiding bare soil creates a water-saving microclimate. Also, if you're lucky enough to be able to do it, ponds and the use of trees in your landscape create humid and cool microclimates. So cooling your microclimate when the weather's hot, and actually warming your microclimate when the weather's cold. But that's not the subject of today's talk. Can both be useful. Oh, someone from Buckinghamshire. That's where I grew up. Um, and also structures like sheds for microclimate opportunities that they present. So I think the thing to mention is that if we start from a microclimatic point of view, then we're taking advantage of um, natural systems to reduce our watering needs before we start worrying about how often we water or how many litres of water that we need. I think that covers it, Katie. Happy to
Great,
talk about it later if people want to come back to it.
great. Okay. Just sort of following on from Paul's sort of overall sort of reflection, it's also important to consider soil structure. And as Paul mentioned before, we tend to, you know, um, we tend to kind of want to automatically go to the sort of the kit sort of solution, but actually part of the microclimate is also considering of um, soil structure and to retain water. The most effective way to do that is to have a healthy soil. And that's just absolutely critical, whether you're allotment growing, community garden growing in your home. So just to sort of say there's a huge amount of information about soil and soil structure. People do PhDs on it. so, to talk very briefly, I mean, the soil structure is about describing the arrangements of soil particles and soil aggregates. And it really, really influences how nutrients are held in the soil and how there's aeration and how there are microbes growing in the soil, living in the soil, etc., and how erosion is impacted, and all that obviously affects plant growth. So we're going to be sort of talking to you about systems today about improving soil structure, which is improving, focusing on building and maintaining organic matter in your soil, and promoting biological activity, and managing the water and managing your pH. I'm just going to put it out there maybe as a kind of conversation point later, but kind of be aware of no dig principles. And also just to say, in terms of soil type, that's when you're talking about soil classifications, which is to do with sand, silt, and clay. And I'm just going to leave that at there because that, as I say, could be a whole big topic in itself. So just a little bit more about soil health. There are literally billions of bacteria in a healthy soil. And it's just when I realized this, it kind of blew my mind. I also discovered recently that, in fact, there are 29 different species of earthworm in the UK, which also blew my mind. And they're all at different levels of the soil. So, because I was so blown with that, I just thought I'd put it out there and share. Just going back to sort of soil health, soil in nature is never bare. And, that's why we're going to be talking about mulching and a lot and how we kind of ensure that the soil is covered. If you don't dig so often, it limits the amount of carbon that's released and the amount of soil life that is disturbed. So I personally practice no dig, but I recognise that's not everyone's cup of tea because there are obviously disadvantages and advantages with everything you choose. In terms of soil health, using wood chip for paths and on beds when rotted down is fantastic. You want to be thinking about planting in polycultures, mixing and matching your vegetables and fruits. There's never an empty bed, kind of successional growing. And having a variety of plants in your allotment, not just annuals but perennials as well. And we'll also touch on composting too. And then I've also got here on this note about bringing nutrients to the surface with comfrey. Um, not quite sure quite where that fits in, but it fits in. There we go. um, so I would really recommend everyone, whatever space in your allotment or your community garden, to have some sort of compost heap or sort of structure. And we do have online a very basic publication that is about composting. There is also an online community composting network as well. Links to that is also on our website. Composting, I mean, one could seriously have a kind of days of composting conversation. There is so many variables and materials to compost, so I'm just going to drop it in today as a starting point to just mention. So now we're going back to Paul, who is going to just talk a bit more about this slide.
I didn't know which slides I was going to be talking about, but okay. Interactions of living systems. Um, So if you can plant trees in the landscape, then the energy interactions of trees in the landscape are really important for catching moisture, actually, as it happens, making the environment more humid, and also in infiltration of water into the soil. A brain hack, if you like, about all of these things is that every living system functions in a way like a net to hold water, not to let water go, whether that's our bodies or our gardens. And the soil that Katie's just talking about has to be seen as a living organism, and its interactions with plants then support the soil life. In fact, the soil has been described as a living organism which is all mouth, but it's kind of a living organism which is also when it's healthy, a net that holds on to water. So trees planted on contour are a way of interrupting the flow of water, slowing water in the landscape as it goes downhill. The same is true of perennial plantings. If you can't plant trees, then have perennial banks, with useful perennial plants, hopefully, or cover crops. So these are all ways of slowing the water down, making it available to your plants and to everything that lives in the soil. Um, where are we? Mulches. Oh yeah, okay. So there's a well-known French grower, a man by the name of Jean Pain, who never really wrote down what he did, what his work involved. His wife wrote it down, but he grew in Provence, in the Maquis, and and never watered. So if you can do it there in Provence, if you can grow outside and never water your plants, you can certainly do it across these islands. And he did it using mulches. Mulches cover and keep the soil cool and moist, and they're very favorable to soil life. There's the point again. Soil life is healthy, then your soil will hold on to water. These are all cheap, effective means of supporting productive systems. So the most resilient and long-term systems involve working with living things, and I think that's what I would try to emphasize, that the soil and the plants in your on your allotments or in your gardens aren't passive. There's a permaculture principle which states everything gardens. And so the plants and the soil organisms are trying to look after their own environments. And if you work with them, then inevitably you will have to work less, which means less trips to the rain butt, which means less concern about pipes and taps and watering cans. Okay. So if you promote those systems, then you will have to work less. And an understanding that they're not passive, that they're not things that you manage alone, can really help. So a lot of people, particularly, and I don't suppose there are any novice gardeners in the forum, but a lot of people panic when they see plants wilt. But plants wilt to conserve moisture. They're helping you. So on those hot days where everything starts to look a bit wilty, and a lot of people respond by watering rapidly to try and restore the plants to a non-wilted state. Actually, that wilt is a response to the environment. And so we can, by good observation and understanding the way living systems work, we can manage our water better. Um, these are my words. I could say that all day long. Still, people would say to me, "Okay, what about boreholes and rainwater harvesting?" Okay, so I'm a bit of a fundamentalist in this regard. Um, it's better to sort your systems out from the site from the I'm not going to need any water resources. I'm not going to need to store water than it is to come at it from the other end, just because then you pay attention to the living systems, and you are never ever going to be able to afford or locate as many tanks, um, as much water held in tanks as you're going to be able to hold water per square meter of good soil on your allotments or in your gardens. So yeah, create local microclimates to reduce evaporation. I've already talked about permanent windbreaks, shelter from prevailing winds, and these all important living systems. I've mentioned Jean Pan, but just to say, um, William Cobbett, as important a luminary of gardening in these islands as William Cobbett, argued that you should never water outside, even in the driest years, even as your seedlings wilt, having been planted out. William Cobbett said, never water, because the plants will put down roots and find those water resources more effectively if you don't water them, if you allow them to come back. Is it me talking about mulching too, Katie?
I can talk about some mulching, so I'll jump
Well,
in
that's I
again.
just to say that's me on the right hand picture at the far end there with some hair in my garden planting potatoes.
Um, yeah, so just to kind of say about, mulching, the benefits is that it saves water, suppresses weeds, and improves the soil around the plants. And as you can see from that list, there are loads of different things you can mulch with, and it all depends on what's available, like locally to you, what resources you've got. We're a big advocate of, using what's around you, and not going to buy expensive products, mulch mats or such like, or all sorts of things. So it's about being a little bit creative and a little bit about talking to kind of your local tree surgeons, if they might be able to leave some wood chip at your allotments, or speaking to farmers and using sheep's wool. There's some nice strips of sheep's wool that are being used in that photograph for those tomato plants, alongside a cut plastic bottle, which is being watered directly into. We'll be talking about kind of getting water penetrating into your beds as well. So that's the sort of summary. The one kind of word of caution in terms of, grass clippings, great to use as allotment mulches. If you're kind of strimming your kind of area in your allotment. But just be mindful of not having the grass clippings too thick, because it can go quite smelly and anaerobic. So slightly drier grass clippings would be preferable, really. And Paul, what were you going to just jump in there?
Just the picture on the left, on the right, sorry, is me using biodegradable starch mulch. In case people are looking at it thinking, "Oh, he's planting through plastic," it's a maize starch mulch, which breaks down and vanishes entirely, and is really really good actually. This is a picture that my partner Sarah took for the Organic Mulch Company website for their to advertise it. So we were kind of sponsored for a year, but actually it's especially if you're in a wetter part of the world where the weed challenge is quite serious early on in the year and where you don't have time to hoe, the biodegradable starch mulch is great. I really recommend it, but it is an industrial product, as Katie said, and it's better to, if you've got the time and the energy and the local resources, it's better to find other things. I wouldn't have been without it, but let's try to avoid industrial products where we can.
Great, thank you. This is maybe the kind of section which perhaps most of you are thinking it might be a bit more about. I don't know. And it's about kind of utilizing your surfaces to collect water. And so any surfaces on your allotment, can be used. Shed greenhouses, polytunnels, even if you've got like anything really. And these are all DIY solutions. I think the one with the greenhouse there's a bit of bicycle tire that's been used because that's flexible in order to take the water from the guttering into a pipe that then is watering the strawberries down there. And then just sort of quite crudely attached guttering on the shed there. And then the polytunnel, some of you might have some small polytunnels in your allotments. We've had a conversation recently about polytunnel and retrofitting gutters, and there are kind of various solutions. You can buy a kind of an adhesive guttering, which some people think that doesn't last very long. But that's also another bit of a longer conversation that perhaps we can have when we have our chat shortly after we've gone through these slides. Here are some other solutions about just showing you kind of collection vessels. So these IBCs, these bulk containers, which can be often used at allotments, especially when you haven't got taps. And so you can clearly, you can roof them. The reality is, however, that roof is not going to be collecting enough water to see you through probably for a whole growing season. But it's obviously better than nothing. And clearly, if you were at an allotment site where you had, say, like a big large shed, and you have a bigger roof, you can have bigger containers, and you can have systems where they all interconnect. And that top one is just a very simple way of taking water straight from the top of the IBC without having a formal roof, just using a plastic sheet and a plug thing. And something else, again, a nice little system. This is a community garden, actually not an allotment, but in Aberystwyth where there's no water on site. So that's a nice little tidy solution. And we've got something else here as well, which is another crude solution to gather, to gather water as it rains. That plant pot would normally be inside the blue container. So obviously when the rain falls, the water falls straight into the container. So you can see how simple some of these DIY little tricks are that can be worth exploring. Paul, I think this is your slide, isn't it? Is this something that you're going to talk about? Delivering water direct to the root zone.
Yeah, I can talk about it because it was talked about in that Keep Wales Tidy webinar the other day, wasn't it?
Yes.
This is this is sort of I think you've said the important thing actually, delivering water straight to the root zone. I can't remember what the guy who was giving the presentation said. The medium was underneath.
Gravel, I think.
Was it gravel? Yeah. So the notion is you create a lined bed which doesn't allow the water to go away, and within that lined bed you have this layer of gravel that the roots go down into and kind of look after their own water requirements. Seems to me to make most sense on places where you've got poor water infiltration or hard standing or lots of compaction, to be honest. Like a playground garden or whatever, or, a place where it's on an old car park or something where there's lots of rubble. Hopefully most allotment sites wouldn't require self-watering beds, but as a way of drawing the water down, I think it's quite interesting.
Other sort of mechanisms that maybe on a small scale in the allotment, if you've got kind of containers or some raised beds, is using a wicking system. And so that's where you've got a standing pool of water, and the wicks then go into their sort of buried into the soil, so that way the roots of the plants will then draw the water And so that's the sort of principle of the of the wicking system.
This is the classic going away for the weekend, isn't it? The wicking system is the classic. I'm going away for the weekend, and I need everything watered.
Yes.
Um, which reminds me about the self-watering bed, of course. If you're growing on a potting bench and you're growing all of your seedlings on a potting bench and you're going away, then you can create your own kind of self-watering bed by putting the trays in a bath and allowing your modules and your pots to water from underneath, which I guess we've all done on a windowsill. But that's the self-watering bed principle, isn't it?
Yeah. Um, yeah, and these are just some other sort of you know, low key solutions if you've got you know, on your allotment. This is the kind of principle again where the plant roots draw the water from you know, from the pot. So Ollipots, basically just ceramic pots. You can also use a ceramic plant pot, which you cover with a lid as well. And again, this is about sort of not having, you know, reduce the amount of surface evaporation, um, and allowing the roots to grow deeper. And certainly in your allotment as well, it can save a bit of time because you're targeting where you're watering. And so that's the same principle. Earlier on in the photo, you saw that plastic pot, the plastic bottle that was cut in half. And so that's a sort of a similar principle. The thing with this is that the water will seep out more slowly than the plastic pot.
And if you
Oh,
use
sorry.
that in the west of, so I was just going to say, if you use that in the west of Cymru, it fills up instead of emptying.
um, and yeah, just in terms of, you know, if you're on your allotment beds, some of you may be, you know, having hoses. There's seep hoses and drip hoses. So seep hoses is where you've got very sort of spongy hose pipe that allows water to very slowly drip into the kind of the whole area of the bed. And that works better with sort of established plants who've got a bit of a root system. And then you've got drip hoses where you've got a specific kind of valve that drips out. That can often become blocked and it can be a bit fiddly, but you know, that's also a mechanism by having water going directly to sort of specific plants. I think that might be pretty. Oh yes, and this is the kind of the the question that we've been asked quite a lot. How often should I water my allotment in hot weather? As you might expect from our kind of presentation, it's not going to be a black and white answer. So clearly, it's going to depend on you know how dry below the soil surface is, and you need to investigate that. You need to kind of, you know, put your fingers down there, get a fork or a spade, and, you know, go down a good 30 centimeters and see, because it's deceptive. On the surface it might look very dry, but going down you might find that you've got, actually there's sufficient water. And as Paul mentioned before, you know, you want to be kind of looking at your plants and are they doing what you're expecting them to do, but also to be a little bit relaxed about, you know, if they wilt for a little period, then that might be okay. I mean, it depends on how, you know, it depends on your intention with regard to your kind of production and how much you know, how kind of efficient you want to be with your growing project. You know, having plants wilted in a kind of in a in a kind of, you know, proper farming setup probably wouldn't go down very well because it will reduce the production. But, you know, maybe in an allotment you're a bit more relaxed about these things. The kind of key message is to water thoroughly and lightly and free, rather than, sorry, is to not is to water thoroughly rather than lightly and frequently, because we want water to go down into the system and not stay on the surface. And also it depends what you're growing as well. So some, you know, vegetables require more water than others, and also depends on what stage they're at. You know, whether, you know, when peas, for example, are flowering, it's quite good to give them a little bit more water. courgettes quite like water, but other things are, a bit more relaxed. Um, and I will mention, like, convention does suggest, to water early in the morning or late in the evening for less evaporation. And so that is, probably wise practice. So that's us, and that's the end of this sort of presentation bit. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about doing a presentation because that's just not my way of doing it. I just like to chat, you see, as you might have gathered. But what would be great is that if you want to sort of throw out questions, and we'll see, we've got loads of us here, so hopefully, and also share your experiences. Hi, Helen, would you like to
Katie, can I just butt in before Helen joins us? Sorry, I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'm going to start it again, so that if anyone wants questions, we've got a publicly available one, and then we've got another recording of any questions that come up now, if that's okay with people.